Today, we are stepping into the smoke-filled, dimly lit chess halls of Lodz in the year 1908. We are about to witness a masterpiece of romantic, attacking chess that perfectly captures the spirit of the early 20th century. Playing the white pieces is Granas, a formidable local talent, but our focus today is squarely on the player commanding the Black Army, the legendary Boris Verlinsky. For those who might not know his story, Boris Verlinsky was profoundly deaf and mute, having lost his hearing in childhood. Yet, on the 64 squares, he possessed a voice that roared like thunder. He would eventually become one of the very first Soviet grandmasters, and today, you are going to see exactly why. This game is a breathtaking masterclass in counterattacking chess, featuring deep sacrifices, relentless pressure, and a king hunt that will leave you absolutely speechless. The game begins with the classic king's pawn opening. White pushes his pawn to e4, staking an immediate claim in the center of the board, opening pathways for the queen and the light-squared bishop. Verlinsky, playing with the black pieces, responds symmetrically, pushing his pawn to e5. This is the hallmark of classical chess principles. Fight for the center from move 1. White continues with knight to f3, developing a minor piece while simultaneously attacking the black pawn on e5. Verlinsky defends his central pawn by developing his own knight to c6. And here, White brings his bishop out to b5. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Ruy Lopez, also known as the Spanish game. It is one of the oldest, richest, and most deeply analyzed openings in the entire history of chess. By placing the bishop on b5, White is applying indirect pressure on the center. The bishop is eyeing the knight on c6, which is the very piece defending the pawn on e5. Verlinsky responds with pawn to a6, immediately asking the bishop a question. Do you want to retreat, or do you want to trade? White chooses the aggressive structural path and plays bishop takes c6. Verlinsky recaptures, but pay close attention here. He captures with the pawn from the d-file, playing the d-pawn takes c6. This is the famous Ruy-Lopez exchange variation. White has willingly given up his powerful light-squared bishop for a knight, but in return, he has inflicted structural damage on Black's position. Black now has doubled pawns on the c-file. The strategic imbalance is set. White dreams of a deep endgame where his healthier pawn structure on the king side will create an unstoppable passed pawn. Black, on the other hand, possesses the coveted bishop pair and open lines for his pieces. Black wants dynamic, attacking play, and he wants it now. White castles on the king side, tucking his king safely behind a wall of pawns and bringing his rook into the game. Verlinsky now plays a very provocative move, queen to f6. In modern chess, we are often taught never to bring the queen out too early, as she can become a target for the opponent's developing pieces. But Verlinsky is breaking the rules with a specific purpose. He is putting immediate pressure on the center and preparing to swing his queen over to the king side to launch an attack. Seeing the queen on the board, White decides to strike in the center and plays pawn to d4. Verlinsky accepts the challenge and plays pawn takes d4. White immediately pushes his e-pawn forward to e5, attacking the black queen and kicking her out of her aggressive post. The queen calmly slides over to g6, an incredibly active square. From g6, the queen is keeping an eye on the white king and applying subtle pressure to the g2 pawn. White recaptures the pawn in the center, playing queen takes d4. Now the queens are staring across the board at each other. Verlinsky develops his light-squared bishop to d7, preparing to castle queenside or connect his rooks. White brings his rook to d1, placing a heavy piece on the newly opened d-file, looking directly at the black bishop and the black king sitting on e8. Verlinsky matches this central pressure by bringing his own rook to d8. The tension in the center of the board is practically vibrating. White plays bishop to g5, aggressively taking space. Verlinsky calmly develops his dark-squared bishop to e7, challenging the aggressive white bishop. White decides to trade, playing bishop takes e7, and Verlinsky recaptures with his knight, knight takes e7. Now, White plays a slightly awkward move. Knight to a3. There is an old chess adage that says, "A knight on the rim is dim." Knights belong in the center of the board where they can control the maximum number of squares. By placing the knight on the edge of the board, white is likely hoping to maneuver it to c4 later, but for now, it is passively placed. Verlinsky seizes this moment to complete his development, castling on the king side. His king is perfectly safe, his rooks are connected, and his pieces are coiled like a spring, ready to strike. White's queen pushes forward to b4, attacking the b7 pawn, but Verlinsky completely ignores this minor threat. He plays the incredibly powerful knight to d5. This is centralization at its finest. The knight jumps into the heart of the board, attacking the white queen and establishing a dominant outpost. White must retreat, pulling the queen back to h4, but Verlinsky does not let off the gas pedal. He immediately plays bishop to g4, developing his final minor piece with tempo, pinning the white knight on f3 to the rook on d1, and throwing a wrench into white's coordination. White plays queen to g3, unpinning his knight and preparing to challenge black's active pieces. Verlinsky responds with pawn to f5. This is the start of a massive pawn storm. He is claiming space, fortifying his knight on d5, and preparing to open the file for his rook. White plays knight to h4, aggressively attacking the black queen. Verlinsky slides the queen safely to e6. Now white pushes his pawn to f3, attacking the bishop on g4. Verlinsky retreats the bishop to h5. White brings his rook to e1, defending the center, and Verlinsky continues his aggressive expansion with pawn to f4. He is attacking the white queen and forcing her to make a decision. The white queen slides over to g5, and Verlinsky calmly plays pawn to g6, defending his bishop and cementing his pawn structure. And now, the critical turning point of the game. White believes he sees a tactical trick. He pushes his pawn to g4. Look at the board. The black bishop on h5 is completely trapped. It has no squares to run to. The pawn on g4 is attacking it, and the white queen is cutting off its escape. A lesser player would panic here, mourning the loss of their bishop. But Boris Verlinsky is not a lesser player. He sees deeper into the position. Instead of trying to save the bishop, Verlinsky uses the special en passant rule. He plays pawn takes g3 en passant. His f4 pawn captures the g4 pawn as it moves past, removing the immediate threat. White captures back with his h-pawn, pawn takes g3, black moves his king to g7, and now, white pushes pawn to g4 once again, renewing the threat. The bishop on h5 is trapped once more. The audience in 1908 must have held their breath. Surely, Verlinsky must surrender the piece? Absolutely not. Verlinsky ignores the trapped bishop and plays the move of the game, a move of staggering genius, knight to f4. He is voluntarily sacrificing his bishop on h5 to completely ruin White's kingside pawn structure and create an unstoppable mating net. White's king is suddenly feeling a terrible draft. The white king steps to h1, trying to find a safer square in the corner. Verlinsky plays pawn to h6, attacking the white queen. The queen must move, but wait, white tries a desperate counterattack. He plays knight to f5 with check. Verlinsky does not blink. He sacrifices the exchange, playing rook takes f5. He gives up a powerful rook for a knight to keep his attack alive. White happily accepts the gift, playing queen takes d8. White has just captured a whole rook, and the black bishop on h5 is still hanging. Materially, white is winning by a landslide. But chess is not a game of accounting, it is a game of checkmate. And black's pieces are swarming. Verlinsky plays bishop takes g4. He finally moves the bishop, but he does so by capturing a critical pawn, blowing open the white king's defenses completely. White's king is stripped bare. The white queen retreats to d1, trying desperately to rush back and help defend the crumbling fortress. But it is too late. The maestro is at work. Verlinsky plays knight to e2. What an absolutely glorious silencing move. The knight leaps deep into white's territory. It cuts off the white queen's defense of the kingside. It controls key escape squares. It is a bone in white's throat. White has no choice but to eliminate this monster. He plays rook takes e2. Verlinsky unleashes the fury of his remaining pieces. Bishop takes f3 with check. The white king has nowhere to hide. He is forced out into the open, moving to g1. Now the heavy artillery arrives. Rook to g5 with check. The rook swings across the board, utilizing the beautifully open g-file. The white king is terrified. He runs up the board to f2. Verlinsky continues the relentless pursuit. Rook to g2 with check. The king cannot step back. He must keep walking the plank. White is forced to play king takes f3. Look at this position. The white king has been dragged all the way to the third rank in a board full of pieces. Verlinsky brings the queen into the hunt. Queen to h3 with check. The king is completely surrounded by hostile forces. He takes one final tragic step to the center of the board. King to e4. And now, with the calm precision of a master artist putting the final brushstroke on a canvas, Verlinsky plays rook to g4. Checkmate. The game is over. The white king has been hunted down and executed on the e4 square, the very center of the board, an incredibly rare and beautiful sight in a competitive match. What a breathtaking display of chess by Boris Verlinsky. He gave up the exchange, he allowed his bishop to be trapped, he ignored material deficits, all because he saw the hidden geometries of the chessboard. If you enjoyed this incredible journey through chess history and watching a king get dragged out into the open, then your jaw is going to drop at what I have for you next. We just saw a king hunted down in the center of the board. But what if I told you there is a game where the king was forced to march across the entire board? A legendary 1912 clash between Edward Lasker and Sir George Allen Thomas, a breathtaking masterpiece, famous known as Fatal Attraction. It features one of the most stunning queen sacrifices of all time, sparking a relentless king hunt that forces the black king on a literal death march from his own back rank all the way down to the white king's starting square.